On the morning of my 80th birthday, I woke up and baked myself a cake. A lemon chiffon, my favorite. I frosted it, decorated it with a single perfect candied violet, and then I sat at my dining room table and waited. I waited for the phone to ring. I waited all day. It never did. That evening, as I was about to blow out the single candle I had placed on the cake, I saw a post on the internet. It was from my daughter-in-law. It was a picture of my son, my grandchildren, and her, all raising glasses of wine, their faces glowing in the golden light of a Tuscan sunset. The caption read, "Celebrating life's big moments with the ones who matter most. #family first, #Tuscany, #blessed." That was the moment the woman who had sacrificed everything for them died, and a new woman was born. The woman who, the very next morning, called her lawyer and set in motion the liquidation of the multi-million-dollar company they thought was theirs, but which, according to the documents I had kept in a locked box for 20 years, still belonged to me. Hi everyone. I'm Grandma Martha. I'm 80 years old, and I live in a quiet little town in Michigan, the same town I've lived in my entire life. This house is filled with ghosts, but recently I have been learning how to live with them. Some of them, I've even been learning how to exorcise. This is a story about a long, slow erasure. It's a story about how my love and my sacrifice were rebranded as my duty, and how my presence in my family's life went from being a necessity to a convenience, and finally to a complete irrelevance. It is the most private and painful story of my life. For years, I told no one. Who could I tell? How do you explain to your friends that your children, the children you gave your entire world to, simply forgot about you? The shame of that admission is a heavier burden than the loneliness itself. But I am 80 years old now, and I have learned that shame is a liar. It's a poison that you drink, thinking it will harm the people who hurt you, but it only ever corrodes you from the inside out. It's time to spit out the poison. It's time to tell the truth. Before I take you back to the day my old life ended and my new one began, I would be so very grateful if you would take a moment to press that like button and subscribe to the channel. In a world that so often makes older women feel invisible, your support is a beacon. It tells me that you see me, that you hear me, and that our stories are worth telling. Thank you. Now, let me tell you about a dream I once had. My story really began not with my children's dream, but with my own. Mine and my husband's. My George. We were married for 45 years, and he was the bedrock of my life. A high school science teacher with a quiet wit and a passion for geology. He could pick up a stone on the beach and tell you its story. A story that spanned millions of years. I was a librarian. Together, our lives were quiet, orderly, and filled with a deep, abiding love for each other and for our son, David. Our shared dream was for our retirement. It was our grand plan, the light at the end of the tunnel of our working lives. We weren't going to sit in rocking chairs. We were to travel. We were going to see the country. Not from a plane, but from the road. We were going to buy a Winnebago, a big, comfortable RV that would be our home on wheels. For years, that dream was our hobby. We had a subscription to RV Life magazine. We had a map of the United States on our corkboard in the kitchen, covered in pushpins marking all the places we wanted to go. The Grand Canyon, the Redwood Forest, the strange, beautiful landscapes of Utah that George, my geologist, longed to see. We went to RV shows, walking through the brand new models, breathing in that new vehicle smell, imagining ourselves making coffee in the tiny galley kitchen, or sleeping under the stars in a national park. The year George turned 65, we did it. We took a large chunk of our savings, the money we had so carefully put away for decades, and we bought our dream, a beautiful, gently used, top-of-the-line Winnebago. It was parked in our driveway, a magnificent, gleaming promise of the future. We planned to spend one more year working, saving up a little more, and then, on my 65th birthday, we would hand in our notices, pack up the RV, and head west. We never made it. George was diagnosed with a fast-moving pancreatic cancer 6 months before my 65th birthday. He was gone in 4. Just like that, our dream died. The Winnebago sat in the driveway, no longer a promise, but a monument to a life we would never have. The silence in the house was absolute. Our son, David, and his wife, Chloe, were my solace in that dark time. David had his father's kind heart, but he was a dreamer, his head always in the clouds. He had none of George's pragmatism. Chloe was the engine of their relationship. She was beautiful, vivacious, and full of a restless, ambitious energy. She had a way of looking at you, her eyes wide and sparkling, that made you want to believe in whatever she was saying. They were living in a small apartment, struggling a bit. David was working a dead-end job in retail, and Chloe was a freelance graphic designer with big ideas but few clients. About a year after George's death, they sat me down at my kitchen table. There was an air of nervous excitement about them. David laid out a series of beautiful, professionally designed brochures on the table. They were for a company called Artisan Roast. "Mom," David began, his voice full of a passion I hadn't heard in years. "I have an idea, a big one. I've been studying, taking online courses. I want to start my own artisanal coffee roasting company, small batch, fair trade, ethically sourced. It's more than a business, it's a movement. People want authenticity, Martha," Chloe chimed in, her hand on my arm. "They want a story behind their coffee. David is a storyteller. He can make this work. We know he can. It's his calling." I looked at the brochures. I listened to their dreams. And my heart, which had felt so cold and dead for a year, felt a tiny flicker of warmth. A new purpose. If I couldn't live my dream with George, maybe I could help my son live his. "It sounds wonderful, honey," I said. "But where will you get the money to start something like this?" They exchanged a look. This was the part they had rehearsed. "Well, Mom," David said, his eyes pleading. "That's where you come in. We were thinking, as an investment." Chloe leaned forward, her voice a soft, persuasive whisper. "We don't want a handout, Martha. We want a partner, an investor. We know how much you and George saved. We know about the Winnebago just sitting in the driveway. It could be the seed capital that changes our lives. That changes your grandchildren's lives. It would be George's legacy, in a way. Building something for his family. George's legacy." Those words were a key that unlocked my heart and my bank account. The decision tore me apart. It felt like a betrayal of George, of our dream. But then I would look at the RV, a constant, painful reminder of my loss, and I would look at my son's hopeful face, and I thought, what is a dream for, if not to be lived? Maybe it was time for a new dream. I agreed, but I did one thing first. I called George's old friend and our family lawyer, a wise, cautious man named Howard. He listened to the whole plan, and then he sighed. "Martha," he said, "if you are determined to do this, I cannot stop you. But we will do it smartly. You are not giving them a gift. You are making an investment. As such, you will be the majority shareholder of the new corporation. 51%. David will be the president. He can run the day-to-day. But you, my dear, will hold the controlling interest. It's just a formality, a protection, in case anything—" When I presented this to David and Chloe, they readily agreed. "Of course, Mom," David said. "That's brilliant. Just a formality. A way to protect your investment." Chloe smiled her dazzling smile. "We wouldn't have it any other way, Martha. We're partners." So, I did it. I sold the Winnebago, the beautiful home on wheels that held all my old dreams. The sale felt like a second funeral for my husband. I cashed in the bonds and the savings accounts we had so carefully nurtured. I gave them almost every penny, $250,000. And in return, I received a crisp, official-looking stock certificate naming me as the owner of 51% of Artisan Roast, Inc. I put it in my husband's old lockbox, and for a very long time, I forgot all about it. I wasn't an investor. I was a mother. The first few years were a whirlwind of activity, and what felt like shared purpose. The business, which I will call Artisan Roast, took off slowly, then steadily. David, to his credit, was a passionate roaster. He had a real talent for it. Chloe was a brilliant marketer. She created a beautiful brand, a compelling story. They opened a small cafe, and it became the trendiest spot in our little Michigan town. I was so proud. I would go there sometimes and sit in a corner, sipping a coffee I'd paid for just to watch my son at work, to see his dream coming to life. It felt like my sacrifice had been worth it. Then came the second sacrifice. A year into the business, Chloe announced she was pregnant. My first grandchild, a beautiful baby girl named Lily. I was overjoyed. But motherhood did not sit well with Chloe's ambitious nature. After a few months of maternity leave, she was restless, bored. "Martha," she said to me one afternoon, bouncing a fussy Lily on her hip. "I love my daughter, I really do. But I'm going crazy sitting at home. I am not a stay-at-home mom. I am a creative person. My mind is turning to mush. And David needs me at the company, helping with the marketing. It's a critical time." David, looking exhausted, nodded in agreement. "We can't afford daycare, Mom. Not on what the business is making right now. We were hoping, just for a little while, you could help out." What could I say? I said yes. Just for a little while turned into my new full-time, unpaid job. I became Lily's primary caregiver. I would be at their house at 7 in the morning so they could go to work. And I would stay until they came home, exhausted and smelling of coffee, at 7 or 8 at night. I did the feedings, the diaper changes, the naps, the laundry. I cooked their dinner so it would be waiting for them. 2 years later, their son, Ben, was born. And the cycle repeated itself. My role as the full-time, live-in but not living-in nanny, housekeeper and chef was solidified. My life was no longer my own. It revolved entirely around their needs, their schedule, their children. The gradual escalation of disrespect was a slow poison administered in tiny, daily doses. It wasn't one big event, but 1,000 small ones that chipped away at my sense of self. My opinions on child-rearing, gleaned from raising my own son, were dismissed with a wave of Chloe's hand. "Oh, Martha, that's so old-fashioned. We don't do it that way anymore. We read a book about it." My cooking was met with faint, condescending praise. "This is nice, Martha, but have you ever tried using quinoa instead of rice? It's a complete protein." I was no longer Mom or Martha. I became a function, a utility. "Can you watch the kids Saturday? We have a wedding. Can you pick up the dry cleaning? We won't have time. The dishwasher is broken. Can you just do the dishes by hand tonight?" There was never a please. Rarely a thank you. It was assumed. I was the family's infrastructure. My own life began to fall apart at the seams. My house became neglected because I was never there. My garden filled with weeds. I missed my own doctor's appointments because they had a work emergency. My old friends stopped calling because I never had time to see them. "I'd love to, Betty," I'd say over the phone, my voice full of a weariness that went bone deep. "But I have the kids." My inner world was a constant turmoil of conflicting emotions. I loved my grandchildren with a fierce, desperate love. They were the light of my life. But I was so tired. A deep, physical and emotional exhaustion that felt like a permanent flu. I felt a creeping resentment building in my heart, and then I would feel a wave of guilt for feeling it. "This is family," I would tell myself. "This is what you do for family. They are working so hard. I am helping them build their dream." I clung to that idea like a life raft. When Ben, the youngest, started first grade, I thought I would finally get my life back. The business was now wildly successful. They had moved into a huge, beautiful new house in the best part of town. They had bought expensive cars. They were the town's golden couple. I was 68 years old, and I was looking forward to finally having some time for myself. To maybe join a book club, to tend my garden. That's when they sat me down for the third and final time. "Mom," David said, that familiar, nervous look on his face. "The business is ready to expand. We have an opportunity to open a second, Much larger location, in North Carolina. It's a huge market, Chloe said, her eyes glittering with that ambitious fire. A better school district for the kids, a better quality of life for us. It's the next step. We have to take it. My heart sank into my shoes. You're moving? I whispered. We'll fly you down all the time, Mom, David said, his voice full of false brightness. And we'll come back to visit for all the holidays. Nothing will change, except we'll be a few states away. We'll be on the phone every day. So they left. And for the first year, they were true to their word. The phone calls were frequent. They flew me down for Thanksgiving. I saw the massive new house, the swimming pool, the life my sacrifice had built for them. I felt the pang of something I couldn't name, pride mixed with a strange, bitter envy. But then, the slow fade began. The daily calls became twice weekly calls. Then weekly texts. Then silence for a week, followed by a hurried, guilty-sounding call full of excuses. Work has been insane. The kids have soccer tournaments every weekend. Chloe is redecorating the new house. She's swamped. The promised visits home for Christmas were canceled. The flight prices are just crazy this time of year, Mom. We'll come in the spring. But spring came, and the excuse was a school trip for Lily. Summer came, and it was a summer camp for Ben. Each excuse was plausible on its own, but together they formed a pattern, a tapestry of neglect. For the next 12 years, my life was a long, quiet wait. A wait for a phone call. A wait for a visit that never materialized. They sent expensive, impersonal gifts for my birthday and Christmas, ordered online and delivered by a stranger in a brown truck. A cashmere scarf. A fancy coffee machine. Gifts that said we spent money on you, not we thought of you. I saw my grandchildren grow up in photographs on the internet. I saw them go to proms, graduate high school, go off to college. I was a spectator to the lives I had poured my own life into building. The loneliness was a physical presence in my house. It sat with me at the dinner table. It lay beside me in my empty bed. I was the ghost of my own life, haunting the rooms where I had once been so needed. The breaking point, the moment the long, slow, agonizing slumber ended, came on my 80th birthday. 80th. A milestone. A big one. A lifetime. In the weeks leading up to it, I had allowed a tiny, fragile seed of hope to plant itself in my heart. Surely for this birthday they would come. Surely for 80 years they would make the trip. I called David a month before. Oh, Mom, of course we'll do something special, he'd said, his voice distant, distracted. We'll definitely celebrate. Let me talk to Chloe and we'll figure out a plan. I never heard another word about the plan. On the morning of my 80th birthday, I woke up with that fragile hope still fluttering in my chest. I decided I wouldn't just sit and wait. I would prepare. I would act as if. I went to the store and bought the ingredients for my favorite cake, a lemon chiffon with a 7-minute frosting. It was the cake my own mother used to make for me. I spent the morning baking. The familiar ritual was a comfort. The scent of lemon and sugar filled my silent house. I frosted it carefully, making little swirls with the back of a spoon. I decorated it with a single perfect candied violet I had saved for a special occasion. I set one place at my dining room table, with my best china and a linen napkin. I put the cake in the center of the table, and then I sat in my armchair, the phone on the table beside me, and I waited. The morning bled into the afternoon. The sun slanted through the windows, tracing a slow path across the floor. I watched the dust motes dance. I read a chapter of a book, but I couldn't focus. I kept rereading the same sentence. Every time a car drove down the street, my heart would leap. Every time the house creaked, I thought I heard a footstep on the porch. The silence in the house grew louder and louder as the day wore on. It was a screaming silence, filled with all the calls that weren't coming, all the words that weren't being said. The afternoon faded into evening. The sun set. I turned on a lamp. I was still sitting in my chair. The phone had not made a sound. Not a call. Not a text. Not an email. Nothing. The hope inside me had slowly shriveled and died, leaving a cold, hard ache in its place. Finally, around 8 o'clock, I knew. They were not going to call. I stood up, my joints stiff, and I walked to the dining room table. I lit the single candle I had placed in the center of my beautiful cake. I looked at my reflection in the dark window. An old woman, alone, with a cake for one. And then, I did something I rarely do. I picked up my tablet, the one they'd sent me for Christmas 3 years ago, so I could see pictures of the kids. I opened the social media app and there it was, at the very top of my feed. A post from Chloe, dated 2 hours earlier. It was a picture of the 4 of them. David, Chloe, Lily, and Ben. They were sitting at an outdoor table, glasses of red wine held high. Behind them, the rolling hills of Tuscany glowed in the golden light of a perfect sunset. They were all smiling, radiant with health and wealth and happiness. The caption read, "Celebrating life's big moments with the ones who matter most. #family first, #Tuscany, #bless." I stared at the screen. I read the words over and over. Celebrating life's big moments. My 80th birthday was not, apparently, a big moment. With the ones who matter most. I did not, apparently, matter. #family first. The hypocrisy of it was a physical blow. It knocked the wind out of me. I sat there, in the flickering candlelight of my lonely birthday, and something inside me shifted. It wasn't a snap. It was a slow, tectonic plate grinding into a new position. The grief, the loneliness, the decades of quiet hurt, they didn't disappear. They were transmuted. They were superheated and compressed under the immense pressure of that one, final, unforgivable betrayal. And they turned into something else. They turned into ice. They turned into steel. They turned into a cold, clear, and absolute certainty. The woman who had baked that cake, the woman who had waited by the phone, the woman who had sacrificed her dreams and her life for them, she died right there at that dining room table. And a new woman was born. A woman who was done waiting. A woman who was done being invisible. A woman who remembered a dusty stock certificate in a locked box. My awakening was silent. I didn't scream. I didn't cry anymore. I calmly blew out the single candle. I went to my husband's old desk, found the key to the lockbox, and took out the papers. I looked at my name, Martha Gable, 51% shareholder, Artisan Roast, Inc. And for the first time in a very, very long time, I smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated, and righteous purpose. The next morning, I did not call my son. I did not send an angry email. My action was as cold and precise as a surgeon's scalpel. I called Howard, my old lawyer. His voice was frail, but his mind was as sharp as ever. I told him the story. The whole story. When I was finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Well, Martha," he finally said, and I could hear the slow, knowing smile in his voice. "It seems your investment is about to mature. What do you have in mind?" "Howard," I said, my own voice calm and clear. "I'd like to call an emergency meeting of the shareholders of Artisan Roast, Incorporated. The single item on the agenda will be a motion for the immediate and total liquidation of all company assets." The fallout was, for them, apocalyptic. For me, it was justice. Howard, acting as my legal counsel, sent a formal, registered letter to the corporate headquarters of Artisan Roast, Inc. in North Carolina. It informed the president of the company, my son David, that the majority shareholder had called an emergency meeting to be held via video conference in 10 days' time. The first phone call from David came within an hour of the letter being delivered. It was hysterical. "Mom, what is this? What are you doing? Is this some kind of joke? Howard is senile. You can't be serious." I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail. The calls kept coming, one after another, each more panicked than the last. Then came the emails from Chloe. The first one was condescending. "Martha, I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. Whatever has upset you, I'm sure we can talk it through. You must be confused." The second one was threatening. "You have no idea what you're doing. You will destroy this family. You will destroy everything David has worked for. We will fight this." The third one was pure, unfiltered rage. I read none of them. I simply deleted them. Their words had no more power over me. The day of the meeting, I sat at my dining room table, the same table where I had celebrated my lonely birthday. I was wearing my best dress. Howard was there with me. The video conference screen flickered to life, and there they were. David and Chloe, in a sleek modern boardroom, flanked by a young, expensive-looking lawyer. They looked pale, tired, and furious. "Mom, for God's sake, call this off," David pleaded, his voice cracking. "This meeting is now in session," Howard said, his voice calm and authoritative. "The majority shareholder, Mrs. Martha Gable, has put forth a motion. The motion is to liquidate the company, effective immediately. We will now vote." He looked at me. I looked directly into the camera, into the shocked, betrayed eyes of my son and his wife. "I vote aye," I said, my voice clear and steady as a bell. "You can't do this," Chloe screamed. "This company is worth millions. It's ours, according to the founding documents which you both signed," Howard said, holding up a copy. "Mrs. Gable owns 51%. The motion passes. The company will be dissolved. The company will be dissolved." The resolution was swift and brutal. The company was independently valued. It was, as Chloe had screamed, worth millions. It was sold to a national coffee conglomerate within 2 months, and the proceeds were distributed according to shareholder equity. 49% went to my son. 51% was wired directly into a new bank account that I had opened a week before. Their lavish lifestyle, built on the foundation of my life savings and my years of unpaid labor, crumbled overnight. They had to sell their massive house in North Carolina. They had to sell their expensive cars. The private schools for the children were no longer an option. They were left with a significant amount of money, to be sure, but it was a fraction of the fortune they thought they commanded. They were faced with the mundane reality of budgeting, of living within their means, for the first time in their adult lives. Their punishment was not poverty. It was the destruction of their entitlement. And me? I took my 51%, my long overdue return on investment, and I finally started living my own dream. It looked different now. I didn't want the Winnebago anymore. The thought of driving it alone was too painful. But I wanted to see the world. I bought this beautiful, manageable condo. I set up an ironclad trust for my future medical care, so I would never have to be a burden to anyone ever again. And then I booked a trip. A first-class, 2-week guided tour of the national parks of Utah and Arizona. I stood at the edge of the Grand Canyon, the wind in my hair, and I cried. Not tears of sadness, but tears of overwhelming, long overdue joy. I had finally made it. George would have been so proud. The lesson, my dears, the one that was forged in the fire of that terrible birthday, is this: sacrifice is only a virtue when it is seen and appreciated. When it is taken for granted, it is no longer a sacrifice. It is simply exploitation. And the love of a parent should not be a blank check for a child to cash. Family that requires your complete self-erasure to function is not a family. It is a cult with a membership of one. My advice to you, to anyone listening who feels that they are giving and getting nothing in return, who feels their life shrinking to fit the needs of others, is this: it is never too late to declare your own worth. It is never too late to become the majority shareholder of your own life. Do not be a footnote in your own story. You deserve to be the protagonist. You just have to be brave enough to write the next chapter yourself. Thank you for staying with me through this long and difficult telling. It feels as though I finally cleaned out a wound that has been festering for decades. The silence is no longer a source of pain. It is a source of peace. If this story has touched you, if it has resonated in some small way, please share it. You never know who might be sitting alone, waiting for a phone to ring, who needs to hear that they have the power to hang up and walk away. And please, don't forget to subscribe for more stories from a life that is finally my own. Love, Grandma Martha. I'll see you in the next story.